All right. Happy Friday, everyone, and welcome back for another Learning Tech Talks. It is the first Learning Tech Talks of 2022. I'm still kind of in awe of the fact that we're already in 2022. And so we are, this is going to be fun. I mean, they're always fun, but this one's going to be really fun because we are bringing together a curious lion and a learning shark. So this is. We've got kind of an animal theme going on with two different, kind of flavors of how we're going to approach learning. But in all seriousness, I put this together last night, Andrew. I went, you know what? We've got learning shark and curious lion coming together.
And two apex predators as well.
Look at this. Look at all the insights. We're only like 1 minute in, and we've already got insights coming left and right. Two apex predators. This is going to be so much fun. But what we're really talking about is this whole shift to this hybrid idea of designing learning around where people are instead of trying to do something and then put people where the learning is. So kind of flipping that on its head. And then how do you do that holistically versus just moving things from one box to the other? But before we get into all of the details of all that, and we're going to have lots of fun along the way, we got to have some fun getting to know you a little bit, Andrew. So folks who listen and watch this know you because they hear from me, but they don't know you yet. And it's January, so we're gonna have some fun with the question, the icebreaker. The first one though is pretty standard. It's a slow pitch. You should have no problem with this. Where are you joining us from in the world today? And what's funny is your accent may deceive people if they hear you and go, "I bet I know," and then you're gonna surprise them.
Yeah, they're not going to expect that I'm actually in an area in that map behind you there. First of all, Christopher, thanks for having me. It's an honor to be here for the very first one of this year. I am joining you from Middletown in New Jersey, where we just got our first dump of about 6 inches of snow.
Okay, and yeah, you had to bust out. Now, when you said you had to plow, do you shovel this? Do you have a snowblower? Do you have a legit plow? How do you go about that?
So here's where the South African in me comes in. I'm full on shovel. Like I haven't got any of that stuff yet. And well, I probably get tired of this, but I'm like, this is a workout, and it's like helping with something, So like I was out there for an hour, like amazing workout. I'm done for the day. Like it was great.
Okay,
I enjoyed it.
You know what? We are kindred spirits then, because when we moved into our house here in Wisconsin, my wife said, "Can you please buy a snowblower? We have a very big driveway." And I said, "No, absolutely not.
I'm going to shovel."
And then eventually we got one of the 9-inch snows, and I went, I probably should have a snowblower because this is taking way too long. So I have one, but when possible, I will just shovel it. So all right, we're
apex predators, man.
That's right. The shark and the lion. We're both shoveling our driveways. What next? I'm in Waukesha, where I always am, joined by my friendly houseplant, Fred. So let's go to question number 2, which is a little bit, it's not more complicated, but it's tied to the holidays. I'm curious, we're coming back in, first episode of the season in 2022. So let's talk about, over the holiday season, what was the best memory or your favorite memory from that period of time?
Yeah, so we were going to go to Chicago to be with some family. We had to cancel that because of COVID, and so we ended up staying here. But I took 3 days away by myself to kind of plan this year ahead for Curious Lion. I was in a little cabin up in the woods. It was great. Did a lot of really good thinking and reading and planning. But my favorite memory was coming back, and this was crazy, man. I know you've got a lot of kids. You got a very young infant as well. We have a 21-month-old, and I got back from these 3 days, and like he does this thing. He runs up to me, like after daycare and all sorts of things. He did that when I got home, and I picked him up like I normally do, and looked at him in the eyes and sort of like connected with him, and I was like viscerally could see him having grown, like mentally and intellectually. Like it was crazy. Just I was like,
he looked at you with different eyes.
Like he knew what it was just crazy, and over just 3 days. So it was, I was proud. I was like joyful. It was just amazing. It was definitely the highlight.
Love it. Love it. Love it. All right. All right. That's a good one. That's a good one. All right. You connected in that moment. So mine was, when it comes to the holidays, my wife she loves to coordinate all the presents with the kids, make sure each kid has their own wrapping paper, like all this stuff. But in order to do that, the kids have to be occupied. And that's my job. My job is to occupy the children, which I enjoy because we end up this is like the second year we've done it. We binge watch animated movies. I mean,
Nice.
legit, just binge watch. We set up like a fort in the living room, make popcorn, do the whole thing, and then just binge watch. You name it. Despicable Me, Ice Age, Sing,
Brilliant.
like all of them, just go through them. So we stayed up way too late, way too many nights. The kids loved it,
Yeah.
and it was a lot of fun. So there you
That's
go.
awesome, man.
All
I love
right.
it. That's the spirit of that whole time, right? Family. That's
Right?
just those
I
are
know.
the memories.
There you
Yeah.
go. There you go. So, okay. So let's transition over to this again a little bit more as we talk about. All right, we know you're an apex predator in the learning space, but how did you end up going into? Were you always in learning? Obviously, you founded Curious Lion. Like, what led you on that journey?
Yeah, so I'll sort of give a quick summary of the background, but I've been in adult learning for about 15 years, and
Okay.
I started at KPMG. I was in audit. I became very quickly bored of, and just like not even bored, just hated auditing. But I loved the
They are
workshop
super
training.
exciting, though. I thought they were
know.
highly
I know.
exciting.
I know. But teaching it was actually, which was great. And so
Okay.
that was the thing. I got up in front of people, and I traveled around South Africa, and we did a lot of training. And so I just fell in love with that act of teaching. And then I came to the States. This was like 11 years ago to develop the training. There was a 2-year rotation. I ended up staying longer. The company KPMG sponsored a green card and all that. And so I just continued. I went into executive education for a bit. We were selling training. So just kind of been immersed in that. I left there. I was at a startup for 2 years. We were making video-based training for hospitality. And at some point I was just like, I actually knew like way before this that I'd always have my own company around something. And that was the thing. And so it was just this passion for teaching and learning and being self-taught around that. And so, yeah, about 6 years ago now, I started Curious Lion, and it looks nothing like it was 6 years ago. And we'll get into that. The stuff we're going to talk about.
Well, because, yeah, I mean, based on, and this will tie into the discussion because based on what you described right there, you know, if you thought like, I'm going to be standing in front of a room presenting PowerPoints, that's not what you're doing, right?
Exactly. And even like the high, like the video based stuff we're doing like high quality video production for hotels. And that was great. It was going gangbusters with that company. And that's how I started. I was like, I know how to do this. I've got the context. So I'm going to make high quality videos, but for like compliance, like consulting firms like KPMG and banks and stuff. And like, I just never ended up doing that. And it was also, it was the wrong approach. And we'll get into like why and stuff. But yeah, like it was just an over investment in just creating this, like, we got to take live, we're going to make it virtual. And it was an over investment in that.
Okay, so I got it, and this will kind of jumpstart into what we're talking about in terms of this hybrid. Because I'm just curious for you, so you'd done both sides. You'd been on the facilitation side, then you were on this high-end digital content side, and obviously at some point you went, nope, that's not it. Like, what made you go, that's not it?
Oh man, I just love your questions here. So it was funny enough, like the realization for me was a personal one, and it was another thing. And I think many in the audience and anybody in this field is also a learning nerd, right? Like just obsessed with learning themselves, right? I'm no different. I sign up for an inexcusable amount of online courses and like I have this like crazy backlog of courses that I've bought but never done. It's ridiculous, but I love it. I love it. And it was probably around this was pre-pandemic. I started signing up for some like quite high ticket courses. They were like $2,000-$3,000 for like a 5-week program. And I was just like blown away by how much I learned in the setting where you're like, you got this accountability, you got this group based learning, you meet live, it's all virtual. you meet live. It didn't feel, it was just the most impactful training I'd ever experienced. And so being the learning nerd that I am, and the fact that I had a learning company, I started like decoding what these course creators were doing, and just sort of like, and I came upon a few interesting ideas, one of which is destination and journey groups, transformational online courses, and sort of like codified that. And then I was like, this is exactly what my clients at companies need. And so I basically, and we can dive into this part in a sec, but
yeah, we will.
To one of my clients, like our biggest client, like I'm super good friends with her. And I pitched this. I was like, PJ, like I've been doing this course. It's this writing course. It's amazing. These are the cool things they're doing. I'd love to, we should try pilot this. And she made it practical in a work setting and helped me make it. And it was amazing. So we basically, I credit her for co-creating a lot of the ideas of what we do now. And then we piloted it at PagerDuty, the company. We piloted it there, I think at the end of 2019. They were sort of ahead of the game because like now that's all companies can do, right? But she was like, I see the value of this, and we did it with 6 of their very senior leadership, and it was just it blew it. Like the feedback was just insane. It was so
let's unpack this a little bit, because I will say I have a lot of conversations with folks about this, and being kind of seen as a tech person. There's a lot of misconceptions, because you'll hear people talk about, okay, digital or virtual learning, and they go, oh, you mean this? And you go, oh, no, I don't mean that. That's not actually what I'm talking about at all. Yeah. Because we're talking about this transformational experience, which, again, I'm very much aligned to you that when you get this right, it's you don't look back and go, I don't know, like let's just do this for a little while and then we'll go back to the way it was. Because when you get it right, you go, where was this all my life type of a thing. Exactly. But I think we need to define that, because anybody may hear hybrid learning or digital experience and go, oh yeah, I've tried that. It doesn't really work, or it didn't really work for my audience. So when you're talking about this kind of experience that is, what are some of how do you describe it to people? Because it can be challenging to get people to align the way they're thinking or their preconceived notions to what you really mean by this kind of experience. Yeah.
Yeah, I think this is so important, because you're right. People, and it's almost sad, because they think they've tried it and it didn't work, and now they're on to the next thing. And so let's talk about what is not. What are those things they tried that didn't work? Right? It is not taking like those live workshops I used to do at KPMG, which is a slide deck and a bunch of speaker notes, basically, right? And turning that into some virtual thing, like an e-learning with a narrator and text on screen. Like, it's not that. It's not even high production video version of that, and B-roll and whatever. You can go as fancy as you want. It's not even that. What it is, and all of those things to me are like the top-down approach to training, which is, hey, we need a training. Like let's create some things, drop it down on the team, the people, whatever. And
we've got some really important things to tell them. So let's put all that information in a structure, and then we're going to package it up nicely, and then we're going to pack it in people's head. To me, that's the whole knowledge transfer approach. We have knowledge. We need to transfer it to other people. That's our goal. Exactly. And we're not talking about that.
Exactly. And so what we are talking about, I love the way you said that. It is the transfer of information. What I'm talking about is the transformation of the learner. Okay. Totally different thing. And how do we actually learn? And anybody who's listening will agree with this. We learn from each other on the job, and back when we were all in offices as well. I mean, it was easier back then. It was more organic, I think, is probably the better word. Is we'd learn from each other. You'd ask the person next to you, like, how do I do this? Like, there'd be like the go-to people who are sort of the internal experts, and that is how you do it. And you'd learn on the job. You'd learn by like doing something, and then hopefully you have time to sort of reflect on it and maybe talk to someone about it and sort of see how you could do it better next time. And that's it. Like, to me, that's the most important part. So what I then looked at, we sort of, with my clients at PagerDuty, is we blew out what the what they had already invested in. And so I think this is where the tech part comes in, because the approach that we adopt doesn't sort of shy away from the tech investments already made.
It doesn't. And I think that's an important.
Yeah,
it does. And before we get to that piece, because the piece I want to highlight, just reinforce that you said there, that going back to what it's not, you're talking about this community element of how do we actually do this with people? And again, where I've seen this be, well, that's not quite it, is, well, we have this high production video and this stuff, and we threw a discussion board in it, right? So that now people can like share their insights on this high production quality type of, and again, that's definitely a step forward from we're just making you jam through a bunch of videos and binge watch videos. It's a step forward, but that's still not, because I've had people go, no, we've tried that. We've tried people kind of going through the stuff at the same time and share insights, and it really didn't click. And that's again not what we mean, where it's just like, oh, you know, kind of go like share a few sentences on what you learned.
Yeah, there's no intention behind that. It's not intentional. And so
I love that you use that word.
Yeah, it's so key, right? So let's let me I'll use that example and say, how would we make that better? The overall framing for this is what I am calling cohort learning experiences, CLXs. Okay, because everyone loves it.
Ooh, we got another. We have to have a 3-letter acronym.
You have to, right? So it's CLX to help you get the most out of your LXP. And so what is that?
That's recorded in your LMS. That goes back into your LRS and then feeds back out.
Exactly. So what is this? What's a CLX? So it's basically the high production video, whatever content you have. It's e-learning, maybe it's even curated stuff. We do a lot of that with clients now. We just curate really good TED Talks or articles online. Like there's just so much great content out there. Right? No, that's not an issue. In fact, curation is actually a great skill for a learning team to have.
And a lot harder than people realize, I think.
Definitely. And so that's your content. So what the content does, that's self-paced and on demand, and it needs to be, right? That's so the learner, it meets the learner where they are. They can consume it when they need to, and they have a certain amount of time to do it. There is a time-bound factor, which will be the next step. I'll get to in a sec. What the content does is it gives people mental models and frameworks through which to look at their actual work, right? So like a classic example, we do this with most clients, is Growth Mindsets by Carol Dweck, right? There's great TED Talks on it, there's articles, there's books, there's all sorts of things. Difference between a fixed and a growth mindset, so useful for doing performance meetings with teams, all that sort of thing. So, so say you're going to consume some videos of that, sort of understand this mental model of what a growth mindset, a fixed mindset is. Then we prompt everyone to do reflection, like almost journaling, like reflecting. We create these workbooks and just like, so what does this mean to you? What stood out for you? That kind of thing. So that primes them for then the next step, which is the cohort part. And that's the key part. The cohort is when...
So you're establishing a foundation and basically a knowledge base to be like, hey, we want to make sure you're on the same page, that you understand these concepts. You've had some time to reflect and process this, to work it through.
Yep.
Now we're going to do something with it.
Exactly. I love this. You just get it. And it's a common language, right? So they come to this cohort, and what we find works best is they're cross-functional. So you have people from all sorts of different departments, which also there's huge downstream benefits to that. But anyway, they all have the same challenges. And actually that's kind of a revelation for them. Like, oh, like I have this a person on my team who's not performing well, and and they get kind of specific in the details. And there's invariably a chance that someone in the group, in that cohort, has had that same experience. And they now have a common language through which to talk about that. So what happens is they start to like troubleshoot each other's issues. And now this person has some practical things that they can go and do to go and work with that team member or whatever the issue is. It could even, it's anything, like it could be client stuff or whatever. And this is the key thing I think you alluded to, is that they leave that cohort meeting. And these are like hour and a half Zoom calls once a week. And we typically do it for like 6 weeks, and then there's quite a big break, right? So it's not like super onerous. They leave that with an action. They're committed to take an action. So it's like set up a meeting with this performance meeting with this person, whatever it is. and then the third step. So it's content, cohort. The third step is they go and take that action. So I call this step practice and reflection. So they go take the action, that's the practice, and they reflect on it. So what worked well, what didn't work well. And then what we do for all the clients, we set up these, like a discussion board. We often just use Slack or Teams or some kind of channel on the messaging system that they use. And that's for that cohort. And they'll just use that to go and say, hey, I just did this. This is what I took out of it, And we'll do one 30-minute debrief live session at the end where they'll come back and they'll talk about each of those things. And that was the part that blew us away, was that 30-minute session. Like, we do have facilitators, which need to be from the company, from our clients. So we do a little bit of train the trainer and stuff.
Which goes to some of the fear that you sometimes hear come from internal L&D folks is like, well, does this mean I don't have a role in this? And it's like, no, well, actually, no, you do, a critical role in this. Go ahead.
But your role, it's a critical role, but your role is actually listening. Your role becomes listening, which is so, so powerful. So in that first one, you're doing a little bit more facilitation, but in the second one, people just run with it. Like they don't want it to end. They want to keep coming back because they saw results. They saw meaningful improvements. They were validated, like someone else's suggestions, and it's incredible, right, to witness. And so this was when we first did it. It was executive VPs, EVPs, right? So like head of finance, head of legal, head of HR, head of product management, and there were like two others, and they just wanted more of these sprints because this was so useful. Okay. And they've
which blows the whole idea out of the water of like, oh well, at certain levels they don't have time or they don't want to do this stuff. Like,
right.
Not true.
Exactly. No, they're like once because it's not, and this is key. It's not seen as separate from their work. It's like part of their work, right? Like they actually come, they get to bring a challenge, they get to troubleshoot a solution, and they go and try it. And then
which I think is we throw the word around or the term around, learning in the flow of work. But I again think sometimes we miss it when we talk about this, because what we end up doing is saying, well, let's take that knowledge transfer stuff and let's like jam it into their workflow. So like in between their meetings, they're going to watch this unrelated video. And that's not what people are asking for when they say, hey, I really would rather learn in the flow. It's like, well, no, it's because I want to actually be applying and doing something with whatever this stuff is. That's what we're getting at.
Exactly, because that's interrupting them. You're not interrupting them with this. You're giving them everyone wants an opportunity to talk and to like talk about their challenges, especially, right? And that's what you're doing. And so like when we've made
the reason I'm laughing is the funny part about this. Okay, the thing that I think sometimes just self-reflective on I think back to my days as a facilitator or this and that is your point of one, you become a listener and you become a facilitator of things. I think sometimes we forget that in the learning component where we're so excited to do the talking or to tell the people the stuff that it's like, that's not one, where the learning happens. And two, that's not what they really want. Yeah. They want to share their experience or engage and do this kind of stuff. And sometimes we miss that because we're so busy going, no, shh.
Yeah.
I have really important things to tell. Yeah. I have really important things to tell you. Be quiet and stop talking. Yeah. You're interrupting my speaker notes.
Exactly. And let me just assuage any fears that anybody out there has that they're going to lose their sort of moment in the spotlight. PJ, who I've talked about before, I mean, she is seen as an absolute rock star at PagerDuty because of this approach now. And she brings... Yep. She's bringing people together. She facilitates a little bit of it, brings in an external expert when needed, but it's very light touch. But she is very clearly the person that's making this possible, right? And so that's what it is. You're creating this intentional space and process, actually, like a whole process around it for people, and that is huge. So she's, her boss loves her. Like it's been incredible. To see it.
I like that you bring that point up because, again, what I've encountered over time is sometimes there's the fear of like, well, do I even have a role? And the answer is yes, you absolutely have a role.
Yeah.
And then that point you brought up where sometimes it can be perceived as it's a less than role. Well, if I'm not talking all the time, on center stage, then somehow I'm less than, or I'm not as important. And to your point, my experience has been very similar. When you're the we'll use some learn language because we love to use that. When you're the guide on the side versus the sage on the stage,
Yep.
you really are seen as more of a strategic partner and someone who's truly an expert in the field because you know how to draw these things out of other people and you know the insights to pull from and how to engage. And sometimes people are concerned that that's going to be seen as lower, and really my experience is people are blown away by that. When you can do that really well, it's not a subservient role in things.
Yeah, if anything, it's a bigger impact at the end of the day. I totally agree, and we can start to get into the learning culture stuff as well, because I think you hit on. I haven't thought about that point a lot, and it's actually really interesting to think. The role of the person in L&D and what does that mean to them, and I actually think they have. I think they, with this new approach and the way. I mean, we haven't even talked about remote hybrid and all of just the way things are going. L&D needs a seat at the C level table, right? The executive table, like without a doubt, and not just a seat, like a very important voice. Because I think people issues are CEO level issues right now.
They are.
Everyone's worried, like 100%. Like that is like probably the biggest competitive advantage is the ability to attract and retain the best talent. Right. I think
to develop it, to attract, retain, and develop it is the biggest thing. And it has been a C-level problem for a long time, but I would say now there's a much greater awareness of it. So to your point of us needing to be at the table, it's no longer fighting for it as much as it used to be. It's a where are you? We need you right now.
And then with that comes the responsibility of, well, now you need to bring something to the table, right? And I think
the seat gets hot sometimes. That's the part that not
absolutely, yeah. And I think this is where the learning culture idea gets so interesting, because I mean, this is stuff that there's, for those out there interested in this, there's a book called The Fifth Discipline by Peter Senge. Fantastic book. It's probably written. My copy's upstairs. At least 20 years ago, probably. Josh Bersin has been writing about learning culture for. I know I've been going through his stuff a lot recently, like 2007. So like none of this is new, and it just blew me away that it's still no one's done anything about it, and that's because, to your point, execution's hard. The seat is hard. Like actually getting this stuff right.
All the things we've talked about up to this point sound very like, oh yeah, that's easy enough. But to your point, the execution of it and the doing it well is not as easy as we sometimes think.
Exactly, and this is where it becomes a C-level responsibility. This is why I think there should be a role, chief learning culture officer. Where you are responsible for creating that environment at the company. Everything from the procedures and processes and those cohort learning experiences we talked about, to making sure you reward people who do training and learning and develop new knowledge and skills. And that's a huge part of it, getting leadership buy-in so that there's a visible leadership part of that. I mean, there's just so many different things that go into this role, and so I think it elevates the role of L&D in a huge way, and I think it's pretty exciting for the industry.
Well, and there's kind of two things that I would jump on with what you just said there. One is that this point of it's an elevated role. I had a call yesterday with a group of leaders from across companies, and we were talking about the fact that this idea of we have to step out of this very narrow view of learning as learning professionals is really, really, really important, because it is a C-level problem, but it's not if all you're focused on is knowledge transfer. If that's all you're focused, that's not a C-level problem. That's not 100%. Something that people are going, man, I just... At the executive table, we're sitting here trying to figure out, like, man, how do we tell people this stuff? I just can't crack this code. That's not the issue. The issue is this bigger, well, how are we tying this to culture and our talent and our talent strategy and all these things? And that requires us to expand our scope. So I think that's a really important point to call out in this. And
Yeah.
you know, where it goes is on us in many regards. And that was the topic of our conversation yesterday, is we have an opportunity, but we got to take it. If we're not going to, we're going to miss it.
Yeah. Yeah. And the benefits of taking that opportunity are just so. I've done a lot of research in this, and I won't be able to list off everything that comes from this, but having a learning culture and being a learning organization. First of all, Josh Burson and team, when he was at Deloitte in 2017, did research, and they found that companies that they had classified as having learning cultures versus not had like 107% higher earnings per share, 3-year average, had a 50-something% higher share price. So like there was like market validation for this as well. Yeah. And just other sort of more intuitive things like the listening, right? So you surface needs a lot more easily and quicker. You surface ideas. So innovation becomes accelerated at these companies. Productivity increases because people start to be able to do more with less, and then hopefully have time to think and, relax and rest as well, which we know is more and more important these days.
Yeah, it's burnouts, killing organizations.
Yeah. So there's a few others as well that come to mind. But the actual business outcomes are real and tangible. And this is, I think, almost the holy grail for L&D, is showing that business ROI. And I think the work we are doing is allowing our clients to do that, which is really, really exciting.
So I've got a follow-up comment / question where I think we can kind of dig into this. But one of the things to kind of close out that piece is I want to tie 2 points together. One of the things you brought up earlier was the intentionality behind it. And something I've said for a while is you have I'm a little contradictory in this, because from my perspective, everyone has a learning culture already. It's just not what you want it to be. And that's the thing, because learning is happening in your company all the time. I mean, it's just happening. People are figuring things out. They're doing all this other stuff. The learning culture is there, but it's probably not what it should be. And I think that goes back to your point of intentionality, where L&D has an opportunity to step into this C-level position to say, all right, we know this is happening, but it is clearly not happening the way we want it to. It's not focused on the things we want it to. It's not like there's a list of things that we can step in and go, no, we want to shape the learning culture to be what we need to drive this business forward. And that requires intentionality and skill versus, I don't know, we're just kind of putting everybody out there and, hopefully they find what they need and hopefully they, get where they need to be. And that's what many organizations have done for a long time, and that's where they're in the challenge that they're in.
I love that point so much. I'm sort of like getting like goosebumps here, because what it means. I wrote down like every company already has a learning culture. It shows that you're not trying to do the impossible and create something from scratch. You're trying to shape it, mold it, guide it, like you said. And I talk about this a lot. Like companies are organisms. Like they're moving all the time. Your culture's changing every time you got new hires coming in. So I just think that's such a key insight you just made there. That it's already happening. So it's just about getting kind of your arms around it.
Yeah. Well, and it makes it less overwhelming. To your point, this isn't an impossible task because you don't have to create something from nothing.
Yeah.
You're not starting from ground zero. It's a matter of assessing where are we right now and what are some of the strategic shifts we can make to actually start to hone this. And rather than say, well, I don't know, we're at ground zero, there's nothing here, good grief. Yeah. It's saying, well, let's nudge and move and shape. And again, I loved your point on intentionality. I'm a big fan of being intentional of what we're doing. Yeah. And I think that's just where you blend those two to combine. So let's transition to this, because I have no doubt there are probably folks who will listen to this, watch this, maybe watching now going, I love it. I agree. I think some of these things make sense. I'd like to get started. but I get you're saying, no, it's not that overwhelming because, hey, it's here. But I'm feeling a little bit overwhelmed by the whole thing. Now, one thing that I do want to call attention to, and then we can kind of talk about where people start, because you mentioned pre-show, we're never going to get into all the details in the remaining 25 minutes. But you're doing something for folks who want to go further with this. You're going to model what good looks like on this very topic, correct? So as a like, where do I get started? You actually have something to help people get started. So talk about that.
Yeah, that's it's going to get very meta. Like, we're going to run a cohort learning experience to teach people how to create.
We're going to learn how we learn in the way we learn it. Yeah.
And it's I can't wait, because it means our goal is to deliver that experience to people, that transformation. And so that they leave that knowing, okay, that was, I mean, first of all, blown away, and then just energized to go and roll that out at their companies. And we're doing that. It's a 5-week program. We're going to kick it off in April, and we can, as a company, we're 12 people now. We are growing quickly, but we can only serve so many clients, right? So this is my way, and I think I've seen it enough now to develop enough pattern recognition to say, I think I can teach this, and we can scale the impact to a lot more companies. So instead of doing a very big project with us, you can come join this program and also be part of a community of people thinking and talking about this stuff. And then the meta piece comes in. It's going to give you all the same common language. You're going to share what's working at your company and learn from others. And I'm so excited for that. It's going to be huge.
Well, and what I like about this is, and my experience has been, if you haven't seen or experienced it, I will say it is hard to picture it. It really is, because we've all had these really negative experiences. We've all been in the, transformational learning programs, and you go through and go, there was nothing transformational about that type of a thing. And so it's very natural to have a reaction to it. And I know once you've gone through it, you do go, oh, okay, now I get it. And you start asking those questions of, okay, where can we do that? And where can we incorporate this piece? So, the fact you're scaling it, because I think that's another component that is important for us to think about, even in the design of this. I think sometimes we create solutions that are designed to keep us as a variable in the equation versus saying, no, we should be designing you to be able to grow and develop and go do it without us.
Yeah.
That's the goal.
Exactly. You design a system that can run without you, 100%. The other thing, just quickly on the course, is that, or it's a learning experience more, it's community and course, is that I found this quite ironic when I was doing this, because you, first of all, alluded to the fact that people don't really get it. I'm seeing that now and trying to explain what this program is. But also, learning and developing people in talent development don't get investment in their own development, and yet they're responsible. Like, it's so bizarre. Like, we go to conferences like once or twice a year. Most of them are virtual now, and it's mainly just transfer of information at that, and that's it. Like, that's our only opportunity to learn as a learning professional, which is crazy. Like, we don't do like in-depth learning experiences for ourselves, and I think that's also going to be so exciting to really give folks who are in the space something that can level their skills up really, really noticeably.
And and again, I think it's a great opportunity for people to be able to experience what good looks like, but then also be able to build some of those skills. Because if you don't, and I like that you bring up the fact, I had a leader that used to say this all the time, and it drove me nuts. And now I find myself saying it, so maybe there's something to it. But the whole cobbler's children analogy of that is one of the challenges. A lot of times we're so busy doing this that we aren't taking time for our own development, which is actually only a problem that just feeds itself, because then you begin falling behind on the skills that you need to stay ahead of things. And then that leads to you doing things that are behind, which you just can never get caught up. And I think 100%. The opportunity to say, hey, where can we not only develop skills beyond just, oh, that was a neat, insightful idea, but how do we then apply them?
Yeah, and the whole exactly, and the whole approach of it is principle is action, action, action. Like take action as many and as often as you can.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
Do you want to?
let's talk a little. Well, go for it. Go for it. No, you
Yeah.
got something.
Well, no, I feel like you were going to segue into this as well, but for the like dive a little bit deeper into some of the concepts.
I was going to, because I'm like, we can't get into the whole thing.
Yeah.
But we can at least kind of talk about it at a high level, so people, instead of going like, okay, I think I kind of get it. I kind of get that there's some opportunity, but I still am not 100% on getting it. Let's
do the 5-minute summary, and I think you've got some images there you can pull up, which will help with this. But so basically, I mean, that's the difference. A lot of what we've been talking about, this traditional approach on the left there, which is we need training. So management comes to learning and says we need training. Create a bunch of learning modules. We drop them down. And to your point, because learning people don't have enough time, they don't have the resources, bandwidth, all these things, they just end up redoing what they did the years before. And it just becomes this so they're falling behind. Versus, we don't learn like that. We don't learn from this transfer. We learn from our peers.
It's this iterative process that just continues to happen. It's a cycle of continuous improvement.
Exactly. And it's peers and experts, internal and external to the company. And of course, there's all important facilitators we've talked about. That's where we learn. And then the reflection. So if you move on to the next thing, what is a learning culture? So I've spent tons of time reading and thinking and writing about this. And to me, I think there are 4 steps in it. There, 1 and 4 key components, they become steps, is you need to have a shared vision. And that is so, so important. I learned this as a business owner for my business, and I started thinking about how it applied to learning departments and learning cultures. The vision is this answer to the question, what does success look like? What does it look like if we have a learning culture, right? And that's different for every company.
What does good look like on the other side? Which, if you don't have that, it makes it extremely difficult to get people on board and even 100%. Understand what are we trying to do here, because there's no concept of where we're even headed.
That's the key. And you got to get buy-in. So this becomes the component for getting buy-in. It's your North Star. So you have to start there. The shared assumptions, it's interesting work by, Edgar, I think it's Skine or Shine. I can't remember how to say his name. Also, very old writing on this. But the idea behind shared assumptions is every company has basic assumptions that they make, which are things that, for example, an example of one would be, it's okay to speak my mind if I disagree with someone, right? That's a basic assumption. Some companies might.
These are the cultural elements where you've got your culture that you put on the board, but then there's and this is kind of how things really work.
Exactly.
Internally.
Exactly. So that's that piece. Then, and I'll show how these 4 kind of come together, but shared stories is that part you were alluding to, which is getting buy-in, getting commitment versus compliance. I have to do this thing, but really getting behind it. So what are the stories, the positioning, the sort of framing of this new approach that is you are going to roll out at your company? And that's obviously unique to each company. And then the final piece is the shared experiences, which are those cohort learning experiences that I talked about. And that's where we really specialize as a company, Curious Lion. So let's go to the next one quickly, and I'll show you how these all quickly fit together.
Okay.
So the work on the basic assumptions work, which is this diagnostic of how we currently operate, that's the outcome of that is your status quo. The visioning outcome is your future state. And so the distance between that is your learning journey. And once we've got that in place, where are we, where do we need to go? What are the steps to get there? We then create work, and this is actually how we work as a company. So that's sort of phase 1. And then phase 2, we help them craft this narrative and the stories, the framework, the positioning of sort of why are we doing this, so that everyone from leadership all the way down to the line, right, can get behind it. And it's something that they want to get behind, committed to, rather than just complying with. And then the kind of all important last piece is creating these cohort learning experiences that just bring it all together. And so I think this was kind of to our very much earlier discussion, was you can't just start with that, because you don't.
I was just going to jump in on that the fact that these other 3 pieces, so often they get skipped. We just skip right over it to let's design the thing.
because we
Let's
know
design
what the
the
topic
thing.
is. Oh, we need like stuff on this. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, emotional
Delegating.
intelligence. That's the thing. We got it. So we got to design the experience around it versus, and one of the things that's interesting, I'm going to bring this down, we'll pull it back up, with that piece is the fact that sometimes, and I've run into this many times over the years, oftentimes that's perceived as, well, that's going to slow things down.
Yeah.
That's going to slow things down. We already know the topic. Let's just get to the experience. And I have over and over and over and over again seen that, first of all, one, you want to talk about assumptions. That is a false assumption to make that this is going to slow things down. It might, if you're looking at it very narrowly and saying, well, yes, in this moment, it's going to slow us down a bit because we need to do that work first. But if you're looking at the whole spectrum, it's not slowing you down because it's actually speeding things up. It's just you move slow to go fast has been my experience with that. But the other piece is the experiences never stick. They never go anywhere if you don't do these other elements. And I think that's such an important piece where it's the hard work that oftentimes gets skipped, and then we get stuck on, well, see, it didn't work. And it's like, well, you missed it.
I was trying to find this Einstein quote, and maybe Abraham Lincoln said something similar, which was like, it's like, if you give me a certain amount of time to cut something, I'm going to take, this is like absolutely terrible paraphrasing, but like, I'm going to take 3/4 of that time to measure and then only 1/4 to cut, right? And like, that's it. Like it's so important. So yeah, I'm glad you've also seen that. It's also one of the hardest things to try and convince people of, because like you said, and it's not even and it's not L&D's fault. It's often management demands, right? And business demands that are like, oh, we need this training. We have to get it. Competitors are doing it, blah, blah, blah. And so it's just like, okay, well, now we have to rush, roll it out. My favorite is like those marquee like leadership programs that that leadership decides what's going to happen, and it's every year, it's a certain set time of the year, and it's like leadership tells learning like what those topics need to be, and it's like, no, like that's not the way to do it.
Well, and what's funny is your point is true, and I think this is where sometimes we end up being the recipient of it. And I think going back to very early in the discussion, this is why doing this right is a C-level. It's a C-level problem.
Yeah.
It is a C-level problem because being able to go into those discussions and being able to say, and not just walk out of it going, well, I got my list of topics, so we got to go on this. Well, that's not a C-level problem. That's not but to be able to go in, engage in that conversation, navigate it, push back, be able to say, hey, we think this, let's dig into it, let's figure this out, let's do these other steps first. That is when you've started engaging at the exec level.
Yeah, 100%. And that, frankly, is like our hardest job as a company, is to get to basically help our clients, being the L&D team, build that business case. That's so
I'm curious. I'm curious on that one. Because I will tell you, you talk to a lot of L&D people. That is one of the biggest challenges they have. That's one of the biggest challenges. I agree with this. I'd love to, but I just keep getting kicked in the teeth and told, what are you doing arguing with me? I already told you, I just read this book. It was amazing. I just need you to roll that out to the org type of a thing.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, if you've been in learning for more than 3 months, you've been on that end of it.
100%.
You've been there. How do you, like, again, we're not going to solve it. And again, I think the cohort's designed to help with that at a deeper level. But even just at a high level, how do you help, or what's your recommendation on that? Because that can be very difficult, especially if you're an organization that has historically, that's how L&D has operated. And suddenly you're going, all right, I'm gonna do this different.
Yeah.
And you walk into the office and you get punched in the mouth and you come out and go, oh, okay. That didn't go. Yeah. I was really hoping to come out and go, nope, we did this the right way.
Yeah. The advice and what we do at all our clients is start small. Is get
Okay.
a small cohort together. Like that one at PagerDuty I mentioned earlier, there was 6 people, and she didn't have to get that much approval for it, and blah blah blah. And like was able to get it up and running, run a 6-week program, and then the results start to speak for themselves. And I call this a flywheel because in that true like sense of a flywheel, it takes an incredible amount of energy to get that flywheel moving. Like really, like just all hands on deck, right? But then the beauty of a flywheel is that it starts to develop its own momentum and it creates its own energy. And eventually, to one of your earlier points was like you can start to sort of step away and you're just in charge of the system. And that flywheel is running, man. Like it's just running by itself. And so, but it does take a lot of work, and it's just like getting a few of these cohorts going. That's it. The results start to speak.
I'm first of all, I'm glad we're aligned on this, because had you said something like wildly different, I would have been like, well, okay.
Good. I'm glad you would have challenged me.
Well, and I would have. I mean, that's the beauty of the show, is I would have just been like, that's not been my experience.
Yeah.
But I think what you've described it's an important message for people to hear, because I tell people this all the time, you are going to get punched in the mouth. You're going to get punched in the mouth. And going to your earlier point of, if you decide you're going to start off with everything all at once and go, you know what, the next time every single request that comes in, we're going to go, absolutely not. We're going to do that. You might need to update your resume, because you might find yourself on getting hit a little bit too hard to stick it out. And I think your point of, there's always opportunities that you can find that aren't the David and Goliath battles, that are, okay, hey, this is not going to be, this isn't going to be that behemoth of a thing. You don't need to take down the sacred cow out of the gate. Like, this exec loves this book and this program, and so I'm going to go head to head with this person and talk them out of it. Like, well, that might not be a good starting place.
Right.
But to your point of finding those opportunities to get some wins, the flywheel analogy is really great. It's going to be hard. Yeah. It's going to be hard. It's going to be a lot of work. You're going to lose. You're going to lose sometimes. But if you keep up with it.
Yeah, if you keep it, and that's the key. Like, you got to keep up with it, because it's not going to be clear that anything's happening, and certainly not. It might be clear to you and those 6 people in that first pilot, but no one else will know. Like, that's the other challenge, right? So you have to stick with it and keep doing it and trust the process. And I hope that people who come and join this course that we're going to be running in April will experience it, because I know that the clients that I've worked with that have had success at this, and Pinterest and Brex and Bolt are 3 others along with PagerDuty, it's because they are 100% committed to it themselves as individuals. Like, they know it works and they're willing to kind of put in the yards to do that. And it becomes this game it's a infinite game versus a finite game, where it's thinking long-term versus short-term. Like, that's the key, right? And that's what's also going to help you in your career, right? You're gonna create that security and sustainability and eventually growth in your career, because you put in the hard yards and sort of the right things, almost the right small steps early on, and you just be consistent.
Yeah. Well, and it is the analogy of, you're playing the long game versus the short game. And that's a shift. That is a shift. It can be a tough shift to go, you know what? We might lose in the short term. We might take some punches, but we know that. We know that going into it, and we're going to take strategic punches, and we're also going to get some strategic wins, and we're going to stick it through. Because going back to what we talked about early, where sometimes people go, I tried that once and it didn't work. Well, you're probably going to try this a couple times and it's not going to work. And that's okay, but then you're going to learn and you're going to figure out, well, what did work, and how are we going to play on that and keep adapting and evolving what we're doing.
Exactly. That's what I'm actually so excited about with the community that's going to form around this program we're going to launch, is that I don't know all the answers. We're just one team, doing this, and we're working with a few clients, and so it's going to rapidly multiply the number of iterations of this thing. Everyone's gonna learn and benefit from that as different people roll it out and go, oh, this worked better for this type of audience versus that one, or this topic, or this time of year, or whatever. Starting to get into, what does it look like with a hybrid approach where some of it's live, some of it's virtual, some of it's in person. I just think there's so many ways this thing can go once you get that core part of it right.
Well, and that goes back to us in some regards needing to model what we want to see in the workforce, which is, if you're looking for the silver bullet framework that you go, okay, so I get this whole hybrid thing. Can you give me the blueprint and I just copy and paste this for everything and then I do it? It's not there. It's not there. And we need to model the same thing, which is, you're going to try some things. Sometimes it's going to work. You're going to try it again, different audience, different time of year. It's not. And you can't just go, well, we're just going to keep doing it, or say it didn't work. And how do we adapt? How do we learn along the way based on what we do? And I think that community element you're talking about that goes alongside to be there together and support each other is huge.
Yeah, totally. And so is that attitude you just alluded to, which how can we keep learning? Like, you're not going to know how to, even if you come through this program and you're fully in the community, whatever, you still, you won't know exactly, especially because every company is different. And so as long as you have that attitude of, you're going to run this, you're going to learn from it, you're going to run it again, that is ultimately what you're also teaching and that's the learning culture. That's what's so everyone in the company has that attitude of, do the action, have time to think about it, reflect on it, and then talk about it amongst peers. That's ultimately what it is. That's the whole thing.
Yeah.
Be deliberate in the action, the reflection, and the discussion.
Well, and it goes back to this whole idea that, and it's a shift, because I think sometimes but also our stakeholders, everybody, we can look at learning as a destination. It's a destination. We just need to get people to that destination. And realistically, going back to the culture piece, or even even if you don't want to use corporate buzzwords, learning in general is a continuous process. I mean, I just even think of what I do with tech. What I learned about, people will ask, like, well, what do you think on this? I heard this session from you 6 months ago. And it's like, well, you might want to talk to me, because what I said 6 months ago is not what I think now, because I've even learned from that. And you don't arrive and go, there, I got it now. It's behind me. It's continuous. Yeah.
That's another funny thing that I've observed, is that we all think like that. I think most people in learning are lifelong learners and sort of have that, what you just described. And our job is ultimately to almost like inculcate that across the company, like that everyone takes that approach. And that's ultimately what we are trying to help with. Is that.
Well, and I think that gets to and we can close on this note, which is, I think that gets to the importance of sticking with it and the change management behind it. As an industry, we may be getting to a point where we're starting to better understand and accept this reality and kind of moving forward. But we've got to recognize our stakeholders are still back here. And so sometimes we look at this change cycle and we go, well, we're right here. So shouldn't we be able to do this? And it's like, no, we got to bring them along for the ride. Exactly. And that's where it is the long game. It's not something that you're going to start in April and by May you've completely transformed the organization.
Yeah, 100% agree. And the community we're going to run is a year-long thing, and I fully expect it to be a year-long process for people to constantly iterate on this and learn. And by the end of that year, it's going to be really fun to see the results that people are getting, and even some of the new ideas and innovations that are coming out of it.
Okay. So last thing then, for this cohort, if people want to find out about it, what's the best way? Obviously starts in April. What's the best way for people to learn about it or get involved?
Yeah, so the best way is get in touch with me or my team. So reach out to me on LinkedIn or Twitter if you're watching it through one of those channels, or just email me directly, andrew@curiouslionlearning.com, and I'll send you some details. The cool thing about this is I'm going to personally interview every single person that is joining that first cohort. partly for that my bandwidth reason, and also just because my experience, we didn't talk about this, I ran a 150 person cohort last year, also kicking off in April of last year, and it almost killed me. And it also was not ideal. It's too big. So we're going to keep it to 50 people, and I'm going to interview every single one of those people coming in. So at the very least, we'll have a great conversation around this, see if there's a good fit for you. And yeah, I'm excited to just build this like crazy, we'll call it a pride of 50 incredible.
We'll keep the lion apex predator thing going here.
It's got to be that first pride. And there's something special, I'd say, as well. I mean, you had experience in this, being part of that first cohort, this community that exists afterwards. New cohorts will join over time. We'll probably run 2 per year. And, so being part of that first one is going to be pretty special. So if you're interested, email me, andrew@curiouslionlearning.com.
All right. Well, thank you so much for making the time. This was a fantastic discussion. I enjoyed every minute of it. And thanks, everybody, for tuning in. Happy 2022. I hope you have a wonderful weekend, and we will be back next week. Have a great one, Andrew.
Thanks for having me, Christopher.